Right, here we go. I'd like to just welcome Julian Hall back to the Unschooled podcast. How you doing, Julian?
Very well, Rob. How are you?
Very well. Lovely to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for coming back to the podcast. For those who didn't see your first podcast, I just want to give you an opportunity just to let everyone know about Ultra Education and who you are and what you do.
Sure, thanks, Rob. So I run a company called Ultra Education, and we teach entrepreneurship to kids from 7 to 18 years old. We operate in schools, so we run programs within the traditional educational environment, but we also run our own independent clubs, which are run either after school or on the weekend, and we run them across London and up to Birmingham.
Lovely. And there are a couple of developments since we last spoke. So I've actually been looking at your Facebook today, and it's blowing up. I mean, there's so much going on.
Yeah.
The award ceremony. I know there's a couple of things you want to talk about, but I also checked out the degree that you've co-written as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. You have been doing your research, Rob. I'm impressed.
That's amazing. That's really something else.
Thank you.
So yes, the awards, the degree ceremony. I think you were quoted in one of the national newspapers talking about Bitcoin and blockchain technology as well.
Yeah, one or two of them. Yeah.
Good. So the things that are really new that we want to talk about today, first of all, and the first one, actually, I haven't seen anybody do this, or I haven't heard of anything like this. This is the game that you've produced called.
Correct. Yeah.
When I saw that you produced a game, I thought of Robert Kiyosaki. If you've read Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is the 2018 version.
Well, exactly. Someone needed to do it, right?
Someone needed to do it. Yeah.
So, do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'll bring it up actually. So we've developed a game called Startup Dash, and it's essentially what we think is the UK's at the very least first mobile game which teaches kids about business and entrepreneurship. So what we've done is we've taken the popular kind of endless runner format that people would have seen in games like Temple Run and Subway Surfer and things like that. And we've changed the characters. So we've got here Entrepreneur Eddie, we've got Pandora Profits, and we've got another coming soon character, the Ultra Kid. But essentially these characters, they are running through a perilous environment where they're having to dodge the competition, they're having to turn failure into success, they're picking up good ideas, they're avoiding bad ideas, they're paying wages, they're crossing wage lines, they've got to pay their staff. And they are, and as they go throughout their journey, things speed up, get more difficult. So the game acts as a metaphor for what it's like to start up a business, right? And all the dashing to and fro that entrepreneurs have got to do. And what it does is it introduces these terms and these concepts to children and to young people in a way that they will want to engage with. So, I'm a big fan of, and I guess in education, they always say that the best way to learn is through playing games, right? So instead of gamifying education, we just created a game. So, it sounds like an obvious thing to do, but I guess, looking at my 7-year-old son, just being addicted to playing these games and watching these YouTubers playing these games, I thought, well, how could I get through to him? How could I introduce entrepreneurship to him? And yes, he'll come to our clubs and engage a little bit, but he's not going to do that of his own accord, right? Kids do stuff of their own accord. They play games of their own accord. They chat to their friends of their own accord. They'll go into YouTube and do things without being told to do it. So we wanted to create something, a product that kids will play without parents and teachers telling them to play it. So it's based on an already really addictive game playing format that kids love and adults love as well. So kids are playing the game on their own, without being prompted to. They're playing the game, and people would typically play the game between 50 and 100 times. And so once a child does that, all of those terms will now sink into their subconscious at the very least. So they'll start to understand the concepts. And I guess for me, it's about, having them readied, having them mentally readied so that when they really do need to start engaging with the concepts and the ideas of entrepreneurship, they are now not alien to them. They're familiar with these terms because they can refer back to these characters, Entrepreneur Eddie and Penelope Prophet, and say, oh yeah, we had to collect good ideas in this game, and we had to, turn failure into success, and we had to think about the competition when they were approaching, etc., etc. So that's the broad approach that we've taken with the game, and we're very happy with it, and we've had some really, really great feedback from it as well.
So if people wanted to download it, where would they find it?
So it's free download on App Store and on Google Play. You just go on there and you type in Startup Dash, right, and you can download the game for free. Wow,
that's amazing. And what kind of feedback have you had from kids so far?
That it's addictive.
That's what you want.
Yeah, right? That's the number one piece of feedback we've had from everyone, is that the game is really addictive. And that for me was, the thing that we wanted to achieve. If it's addictive, then people will play it without being told to play it, and then we can get the learning in.
Right, that's fabulous. And then the other thing that's going on with Ultra is that you've got a new term starting.
Yeah, so again, really exciting. We've got a new term starting in about 2 weeks. We've got a new improved program that we've developed and approach to teaching based on the last 2 years of evidence and experience that we've been collecting. So we've got clubs starting in Harlesden, Croydon, Wood Green, Leighton, Stratford, Goodmayes and Birmingham, all starting in the next couple of weeks.
Wow.
And if for anyone who wants to find out more, just go to our website, ultra.education, and you can find out more about how to book a place and get involved. And they've become really, really popular. We are running a kids taster session this Saturday at a really, really swanky software company called Pivotal in Shoreditch.
Right.
And I remember just 2 weeks ago, I put up the Eventbrite for the session, and the following morning, a parent contacted me and said, "Oh, Julian, I think the website's broken because I can't register." So when I went onto the website, it's because it was full. So literally between 9 o'clock at night and 8 o'clock in the morning, we had sold out, right? And that's brilliant even for us. So we know that the demand is sky high. Yeah. So we're just doing our best to try and meet that.
So this is parents basically signing up their kids.
Correct.
Because there's something in your vision that they relate to, right? They are the kind of children that come to you are often from looking at the videos and the testimonials, very creative kids who need an outlet, kids who could really benefit from taking things that they love doing already. That was the key thing, really. Your tagline is something along the lines of do what you love.
Do what you love, yeah.
Do what you love. Which I really found interesting. I hadn't even really focused on that before, but
that's central to what we do, and I'm really pleased that you picked up on that. Actually, it means the marketing's working. But central to our approach to teaching entrepreneurship, because I guess if I wasn't doing it, I'd be fascinated about how do you teach a 7-year-old entrepreneurship? How do you do that? And I guess what I've done over the years is, as we've all done, looked at really successful entrepreneurs and tried to work out, well, what's the magic? How have you done this? And I think Steve Jobs said it best when he said, the only way to do great work is to do what you love. And actually, if you go into places like Shoreditch and Tech City and, where the startup ecosystem is really booming in London, they know this. They know that actually you've got to really love, whether you're doing design, coding, whether you're a project manager, you've got to love what you're doing. Otherwise, you're not going to do a good job. If you don't do a good job, nobody's going to want to buy your stuff.
Yes.
And that's the commercial bit. So the do what you love sounds warm and woolly, but the commercial part of it is, if you love what you're doing, you will naturally improve the product or service. You will naturally want your customers to have a good experience. You will naturally want to make sure that whatever you're delivering provides your customers with what they're looking for. Whether you've said it's faster, whether you've said it's going to add more value, whether you've said it's going to be more cost effective, whether or not it's going to solve a problem. You want that to work as well as possible, as good as possible, because you are genuinely passionate about whatever it is you're delivering. And so that's where we start. We start with, because, you know, people think money is the biggest motivator, and it's not. If money was the biggest motivator, nobody would ever call in sick, right? And we know 9 out of 10 businesses fail. And part of the reason I think for that is because lots of entrepreneurs and business people are imposters in their industry. They're only doing it because they think they can make some money. They're not doing it because they are genuinely passionate about it, or because they think they can add some value and make a difference. Whereas those that do make a difference tend to stay for the long stretch and become successful because they actually love what they're doing and they want to improve on their industry or improve on a product or service that they're delivering. So that's central to how we teach entrepreneurship.
And also, I mean, you know, people won't stay the course if they don't love it.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And, you know, I think entrepreneurship is not easy. You know, doing anything of value isn't easy. And if you aren't really passionate about doing it, then the tough times are going to outweigh your passion. Yeah. Whereas if you're passionate about it, the passion is going to outweigh the tough times, and then you'll see it through to the end.
I think part of the genius of what you're doing, I think back to myself at school, okay? Sorry, I'm trying to tie two ideas together here. I'm thinking of an interview that I saw you do with a little girl that you work with who'd done a colouring book, you know, one of those books?
Yeah, that's Jasmine, yeah.
Jasmine, right? So I'm thinking back to myself and other kids that I see at school who are passionate about art.
You're right.
Passionate about art. They might have done a qualification in it. And some of them get to a standard which is actually unbelievable.
Yeah.
You see, like A-level kids work.
Yeah.
And then the tragedy for me is that almost all of them drop it. Why? Because they're oh, you're not going to make any money out of this. This is
absolutely, yeah.
Right. So what you're doing is actually providing that missing link and saying, now hold on a minute, that passion that you have for this, that's the key. We just need to show you how to channel it.
Absolutely. And I think there are some myths which kids are given, and that is things like the creative sectors don't make money. It's not true. In fact, the creative sector in this country is one of the fastest growing, biggest revenue generating industries in terms of growth over the last 5 or 10 years. And I know this personally because I work with creatives on the tech side, and on the culture side, and they're well paid. You know, the ones who can marry their creativity with some entrepreneurship and some professionalism, they do well. But this isn't something that kids are told, right? And I personally know artists who will, you know, produce a piece of work and they're charging £10,000-20,000 for it. You know, I personally know creatives who are working on tech projects and are getting paid, you know, anything between £200 and £400 a day for their work. Now, are kids told this in school? You know, so probably not, right? And the thing is, I don't even blame the teachers because the teachers don't know this. So the teachers don't know what the commercial value of, you know, some of the creative disciplines that exist within their kids. They don't know because they're too, you know, they've got too much on their plate to look outside of. And I've heard teachers tell me this, that they're in a bubble. They don't have time to look outside of education to see what's happening. And they probably rely on the news, social media, going to conferences here and there to find out what's really going on. But even that's going to be filtered to a degree. So, you know, what I'm really passionate about is connecting children and young people with what is actually happening today in the world of business and enterprise. And
that's exactly what I wanted to sort of move on to. So
yeah,
moving on to that. It's really about the future of work, because that was one of your posts, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think it was a picture of you looking into your phone and describing how you basically work from your phone. You know, your mobile lifestyle.
Yeah,
you've made it work for yourself. So that's one aspect that I want to kind of discuss with you. But the other one, just going back to school, etc. Do you think that in any sense in education we're selling kids a lie? We're telling them that, you know, you need to get your exams because you need to go to university, because if you go to university, you're going to get a good job.
It's a tragedy.
How true is that now?
It's a tragedy, actually. And, you know, there's this thing around, I was, you know, came across another post a couple of days ago around cognitive dissonance. And I think to some degree that exists within education. And I think educators are coming to a crossroads where they are now facing a conundrum which says, we've been taught to teach this stuff, but we know it doesn't work, right? So is it because, and the cognitive dissonance comes in potentially where they start to say, the future is bad. So the future is bad, so I'm not going to change. And so therefore it justifies what I'm doing in the classroom, which for me is a natural human response, because you're doing it day in, day out. The only other alternative is to leave education, which a lot of teachers do, right? A lot of teachers come to that crossroads and think, well, what I'm teaching isn't correct. It's not true. It's ultimately a lie. So I'm going to leave. Others don't. And some are probably in limbo somewhere. And the reason why I'm focusing on the teachers is because I've worked with a lot of teachers, right? So I genuinely sympathize with their position. But the public bash teachers, whereas it's actually education as a framework that's broken. It's not that we have bad teachers. I'm sure there are bad people in every industry, right? But across the board, it's not the fact that we have bad teachers. It's just that teachers are working within a framework. They have a job to do. And effectively, they're playing to the tune of Ofsted. And, you know, they've got to hit certain targets, as everyone does in every industry. And they know those targets often have nothing to do with actually educating, in the true sense of the word, that child, that student. They know they're just hitting targets. So, yeah, I mean, you know, you could put it as simply as saying that it's a lie. But I think it's a bit more complicated than that. I think if you speak to the very top, you know, of the food chain in education, and then you speak to teaching assistants, I don't think they'll disagree with what we're saying principally. But then the question becomes, now what? Now what do we do, right? Education, you know, you can't close education and say, you know, we're under construction and we'll be back in a few weeks. You can't do that, right? So what do you do? Yeah, and I think it's a complicated, and I'm not saying this to excuse or to make excuses for education. It's just that I've been in the environment enough to know that if you've got a school of 2,000 kids in a secondary school, for example, or you've got 500 kids in a primary school, you know, what do? You know, it's a tough call. If you're a head teacher, you've got Ofsted on your back. You've got parents who are saying, you know, our kids aren't being ready for the world. It's a tough place to be. And, you know, and I do think that the reason why individuals like yourself exist, and the reason why companies like Ultra Education exist, is to actually plug the gaps. Because, you know, there are gaps and there are holes in the current education system. And I think we exist to help plug those and to work with educators to find solutions.
Just lots of things sort of flashed in my mind when you were talking then. So one is a quote, I don't want to misquote, but I think it's Einstein, who said something along the lines of, you can't solve a problem with the mind that created it.
Absolutely, yeah.
To me means, and if you look at, for example, most technological disruption, it comes from outside of an industry, so right? And its impact on the taxi trade.
Yeah,
it had nothing to do with the taxi trade. It came from outside, right? It was fresh, disruptive thinking.
Great example.
I believe that people such as yourself, and hopefully people like myself, can actually really influence quite profoundly what's going to go on. So that leads me to another one of your posts, which was about disruption and about automation and the amount of jobs that are going to be lost in the future economy through automation. And you even made a description, I think, of how you saw the school of the future.
Yeah.
In 2030. So can you talk a little bit about that? How you think it's going to go?
Yeah. So, and actually, our patron, Sir Anthony Selden, recently made a prediction that by 2030, I believe, he said that robots will be teaching or replacing teachers. And, it's quite a bold statement. I think he was the first person to put a time on it, put a deadline on this thing. Now, for me, I've always seen technology as an enabler. So from the time I was 7 or 8 years old, I was playing on my old Commodore 16, and I saw it. I wasn't afraid of it. I've never been afraid of technology and the advancements that it brings. But I'm aware that, whether it's because of movies or people's comfort zones, that actually lots of people, most people, in fact, when I put those posts up, and you want to look at my LinkedIn, I mean, my LinkedIn's going crazy when I put these posts up. Yeah, I mean, we're talking hundreds of comments and there's a real split between people who are saying, look, this is bad, jobs are going to go, robots are going to replace humans, and, we're now in dire straits. This is Skynet stuff, right? Terminator reference for those of you who are too young to remember. But actually, my point is this. If we don't get involved in the conversation, if real people, if real educators don't get involved in the conversation, then perhaps it could turn out bad, right? Perhaps it could be. But if we get involved in the conversation now and we start to shape where this thing goes, then we can measure how technology impacts education, as opposed to it just squashing educators at the moment, because it looks like it's just going to fall on education and squash it in a way that perhaps isn't philosophically the most beneficial for people and students. But if we get involved in the conversation, and we can say, actually, because on my LinkedIn there was a teacher who said, look, a teacher in a classroom has got to have 8 arms, right, and 2 heads, and actually potentially some AI, a robot could do some of the marking, the registration. Yeah. It could help to provide information. And somebody made a really good point. I'm not sure if it was on my Facebook or LinkedIn. I want to say LinkedIn. They said that teachers, you can't replace the guidance and the motivation and the support, the genuine support that a human can give. No, you can't. But what a robot or what an AI can be really good at doing is pulling information, right? They can pull information from here, there, and everywhere, from the World Wide Web, and provide a knowledge base that no teacher is going to be able to replicate. And the teacher can use that and facilitate that in that knowledge share of information. And it's funny. Just a few days ago over Easter, my 7-year-old said, when we're in school, our teachers asked us to, just come up with lots of questions for him. But when the questions became too hard, he had to use Google. And my wife and I, we died with laughter. But what's the difference between that? I mean, Google is just a primitive, it's not AI, but it's a database of information. The only difference between AI and Google is that you'll just ask the question within context, and then the database will be able to deliver that information in an intelligent way, right? And perhaps understand what level a student is on, so it understands if Joshua asks the question, Joshua is a fast learner, so I can now deliver this piece of information to Joshua in a manner that suits his level of attainment, of achievement, right? And that's, I mean, who doesn't want that, right? Who doesn't want that? And I think if we look back at education in its true sense of the word and teaching, we have to remember that education was for the privileged. It was for the rich, right? It was for the wealthy. What then happened when the government rightfully decided, the country rightfully decided that education should be for all, the quality of education had to drop because you had more people to teach, right? And, this idea of a master teacher now became lost because a master teacher can only work with a small number of children, right? If you have some AI, a robot in the classroom who can act as a teaching assistant and pull information so you can do the human work of, making kids feel good. There's a gentleman called Mark Martin who's the Urban Teacher on Twitter, and he said to me yesterday that he said the golden fleece of teaching, the golden, nugget of teaching is making kids feel good about themselves, right? And a robot's not going to be able to do that. A human can do that, but humans don't have the time to do that if they're worried about behavior management and, who's doing what and pulling information back and forth. So that's my view on it.
So, yeah, loads of things there. I mean, one of the holy grails of teaching for a long time has been this idea of personalised learning. And when you try and match up personalised learning with how you've just described the teacher's job, 4 heads and 8 arms, it ain't happening, right? With AI, you've got this concept of adaptive learning, which you also alluded to. So they can then differentiate what one child needs, what another child needs. They can push the child on. So exactly, the possibilities, if we manage it properly, are really amazing. I personally think. But ultimately, and again, when you spoke about the idea of rich families having master teachers, etc., and then when you go into an institution, you kind of get mediocrity just because that's all you can afford. So yes, the AI, for example, could bring the standards back up. So there are amazing possibilities. Wow, we've covered a lot.
It's always good talking to you, Rob.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So basically what we're saying is the future of education is fine. There's no problem. We just need to work with the technology. We need more people like yourself working with children, encouraging them to think, working with children and encouraging to make the connection between what they really love, what they're doing, what their passions are, and the fact that they can make money from this in the future. Those really are the key skills, I think, those entrepreneurship skills. Just one sort of few final points. We were talking about maybe the idea of education being a lie or not relevant to what it is now. How do you see your degree course fitting in with that then?
Yeah, good question. So for those of you who don't know, I worked with Barnsley College to create a degree in enterprise and entrepreneurship. It was validated by Hull University, and I started delivering on that September last year to our first cohort. And I think what's interesting is, entrepreneurs would say, how can you have a degree in entrepreneurship? You just go out and do it, right? But actually, there are different types of people, right? And what I mean by that is, entrepreneurship has always been viewed as this thing where you kind of just jump off the cliff and the parachute opens on the way down, that kind of jazz. But there's a huge degree of risk that comes with that. And not everyone has that appetite for risk. Some people need to be taken through a process where their hands are held and they're gently eased into entrepreneurship, right? Which is the reason why, against the kind of tongue-in-cheek comments from, true entrepreneurs about teaching entrepreneurship in schools and in universities and stuff, I genuinely believe that there is an honest place for things like that, for degrees and A-levels and things like that. And I think what that will do is it will open the door of possibility for entrepreneurship to many people, because lots of people like the idea of entrepreneurship, but where do you start, right? Where do you go? Do you buy a book? Do you buy a book that's now out of date? Do you go onto YouTube and try your luck? Do you, what do you do, right? Do you do it yourself and then lose loads of money? What do you do, right? So to actually, for mature students to have, and for younger ones to have a course which takes you gently through the process of what all of this means, I think there's a huge value to that. And I think it will make entrepreneurship far more accessible to lots of people. And I think both educators and entrepreneurs want that going forward.
Could you see it as a GCSE and an A-level?
Absolutely. In fact, there is an A-level. There is actually an A-level on entrepreneurship. And myself, a gentleman called Nigel Adams, Margaret Casely-Hayford, and a few others from Buckingham, University of Buckingham and University of Coventry, who both have degrees in entrepreneurship. We were talking about this. We were talking to I believe it was OCN, the woman who had actually put that A-level together, and she was telling us about the challenges that they had with that. And a lot of it comes down to the way in which we pathway students at the moment, because really, schools, the pathway is then to college, from college the pathway is then to university, from university the pathway is then into a job, or from college into a job, or from school into a job. It's not from school into running your own business, or college to starting your own business, or university starting your own business, right? So those qualifications kind of get lost because there isn't a funding stream that is attached to starting your own business. There's a funding stream which is attached that institutions can draw down on if you get them into a job, right? So, there were some challenges, there's some catching up that I think the government need to do around that. But to answer your question, again, yes, if you think about over the next 5 to 10 years, there are going to be lots more degrees in entrepreneurship, right? But in order for students to naturally progress onto a degree in entrepreneurship, it would make sense that they come from an A-level in entrepreneurship and come from a GCSE in entrepreneurship. And arguably, those subjects were, introduced from primary school, right? So I think that journey and that pathway needs to be created from primary school all the way up to university, just as you have any other topic. I think entrepreneurship needs to be given the same level of focus and attention that any other subject has been given.
I mean, there is funding now for apprenticeships. I think the government's actually wising up that we can't keep failing 30 to 40% of our student body.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We can't just allow them to drop through the system without relevant GCSEs to get into further education. We've got to provide something, and there's an enormous amount of untapped potential, as I know, as you know, and maybe this could be a route to it.
Yep.
So if there was funding attached in the way there is for apprenticeships, maybe you can leave school at 16 and follow an entrepreneurship route and have that kind of support there, then we're doing something to solve the problem. So there seem to be like individual education institutions like Barnsley, for example, like the examination board you're talking about, who are actually doing a bit of forward thinking.
They are, but it's just not joined up, that's all. I think there are pockets of educators and organisations who are doing some amazing things, but it's just not joined up. And I just think it's just not joined up because it's early days. I don't think it's because, there's, somebody doing something wrong per se. I just think it's still early. Lots of people still don't know what enterprise and entrepreneurship is or means.
No.
So it's just going to take some time. And, the UK was built on institution. It wasn't built on entrepreneurship. So for us to weave entrepreneurship into the institution, I mean, that's going to be a bit of a challenge. But I do think there is a willing, but it just needs to be facilitated, and somebody just needs to see it through to the end. And hopefully Ultra will be part of that conversation, as I hope you too will be, Rob.
I would love to be. So if you're watching and you are that person who can join all the dots for us, high up in government or business or wherever you are, then let us know and we'll be there. Julian, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
Great to talk to you. We always go deep, which is great.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the success with the new term.
Thank you so much, Rob, and good luck with the podcast. Podcasts are where it's at the moment. So people love content. They love interesting conversations. So, keep it up. Keep going.
Lovely. Thanks so much. Speak soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.